Hello, Jamie. How are you, sir?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for
Excellent.
for this little talk. I'm super excited.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I mean, I was just saying about, just before we started recording that I'm something of I'm a four. I would call myself like a bit of a lapsed Formula One fan. I was so into it when I was a kid. Like, Nigel Mansell, Ayrton Senna. I went to the British Grand Prix in 1997, where I saw Damon Hill win his first point for Arrows. That was the year after he won the championship, and then he
Okay.
moved teams. And that kind of blew my head off. But as the years have gone on, I don't know, maybe it's just me getting older, but I found it less engaging these
Yeah,
days.
I
Which
agree.
as a British guy, I should really wash my mouth out considering what Lewis is doing.
Yeah,
But I don't know, man. It's
yeah,
it's kind of it's fallen by the wayside a little bit for me these days, unfortunately. But it is what it is, right?
yeah. I mean, Formula One has changed a lot through the years. I completely understand your point of view. The 90s were the magic era of the magic period of Formula One. It was a shame actually that they've changed the rules so much. People really
Mm,
think the audience don't really understand anymore what's going on with this hybrid era. The sound changing so much. The cars are not really sounding as they were in the past.
hmm
That's
Oh,
something,
looking right.
yeah. So that's something like very important for the sport, for the drivers, for the audience, for everyone. I think
Mm,
because the sound is music, and V10, V8 engines were music at that time. So I was not really happy when that happened. And then obviously you need technology to win. You need technology to be in the front. Motorsport, it's all about technology. It's a very different sport from tennis or golf, but still pretty cool. And it would be nice if things would be more balanced, and there would not be so much of a difference between cars, of course. So
mm,
let's see
mm.
what's going on in
No,
the future.
exactly. Exactly, but we're not here to talk about Formula One. We're here to talk
Sure,
about music,
exactly.
right? But it's interesting though because I thought when this kind of came up, this opportunity to speak to you, my mind instantly went to what are if there are any similarities between Formula One and music and like music production in general, right? Where you were talking before we started recording about like um feeling the music in a certain way and knowing that like you had a certain emotional reaction when you played a certain track and things like that. And my mind goes to, well, is that the same when you're like in a car and you can like feel the road underneath you, you can feel the car in a particular way, and that brings out certain emotions and stuff as well? I'm just really interested in whether or not there's been any sort of like shared skills that you've had from your time as a race driver that you've been able to take into music, or has it been completely separate for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have a lot in common, actually. I think both of them are an art. What I fall in love for music is because I have the possibility to create. I have the freedom to create whatever I feel at the time. And obviously, technology nowadays gives you those tools, amazing tools to create on whatever direction you want. Something that was not as easy, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. But racing to the highest level and probably driving to the highest level, whether it's a go kart or a touring car or Formula One, it's also an art to make that perfect lap and match every single corner, and you know that you've not left a half a tenth behind you, and you've matched that perfect lap. It's an art. And obviously there is technique behind, like music. You need technique in order to improve and be good at something. So this takes time and a lot of effort and hours of work, hard work. But I would consider this as an art. I would consider when something emotional, I'm a very emotional person. That's why I call it this way, because when something like really inspires you, like driving or making music, when you hear a sound, a certain frequency, or something that really is calling inside you, then you are giving your very best for it. You have a commitment to that. you are motivated behind that idea. So that inspiration comes from both music and basically from whatever you do in life. I think it's really important to be inspired, to feel inspired. Otherwise, it's very difficult to give your very best on whatever you do. So I think that's that's probably one of the most related and comparable things I feel between both.
That's super interesting. And again, on the outside, they don't look related at all. But like you say, they're both art forms in their own way. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because if you think about the drivers that we have elevated to like sort of godlike status, like the Ayrton Sennas of this world, so to speak, like they drove really emotionally. Like Ayrton drove primarily with his emotions.
Yeah.
And then when you think about it from a DJ standpoint, we often think of the artists who make us feel those emotions in those moments and actually like display those emotions a lot as well while they're performing. So predominantly the art form is driven by like human emotion, which I think is a lovely thing, and it's the same in the studio as well. Like, I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with one of our members yesterday. And it shows you just about how we can get stuck in a kind of a creative kind of rut, so to speak. Because I said to this guy, like, the number one thing you can do to actually make things a bit more inspiring in your studio is to take the chair out of your room and produce while you stand up. Because if you start to produce while you stand up, the likelihood is you're going to do something sooner or later that's going to make you dance. And if you're not making yourself dance in the room and feeling those emotions, how is it going to make anyone else feel that in the club,
Of course.
So it has to come predominantly from you, right? That's the way it has to be.
I completely agree, actually. You have a very good point in there. Emotions is what it's moving. It's what it's moving you, what it's moving the people. And you have to feel that, not just in the studio. And I always say, not every day in the studio is a happy day. And sometimes you head to the studio and you're not really motivated to make music. What happened to me during the pandemic, I've written a whole album. And after I finished, I was like, I'm kind of, I've run out of ideas. I need a break. And that happens very oftenly, So just don't, I feel like if I put more energy in the studio on those moments, I'm just losing time. It's nothing, it's going to work. Whenever you are starting a project and you are not really feeling it or you're not really into it, it's better you leave it. So something similar happens in racing, when obviously racing depends not just on you. As I said before, it depends a lot in the car, in the performance of the car. In Formula One, it depends in a lot nowadays in aerodynamics. So literally downforce, which gives you more grip level. And that gives you confidence under the braking zone, on the traction, and obviously lap time and performance. So it's not always depending on you, but what you have to fight through is to have a good car balance. And sometimes you just feel that you're in that zone that nobody can beat you. And something also happens when you play music. You are maybe, playing, I know for me, and I guess for a lot of professional people in the music business, like the music quality is super important. So if you're in a booth and it's not sounding great, you have not the same connection with the crowd, maybe the energy of what you are playing. Every track sounds different in a different place. So something similar happens in racing, as I said. So this connection and this energy that you sometimes feel that you're in the zone and you're just, okay, I'm killing it. And inside you're like, it couldn't be better than that. I'm driving to the fullest. The car is doing exactly what I feel. Before heading into a corner, I know what the car is going, and I know how the car is going to react and do. And exactly that. Sometimes it's not happen every time when you play music, especially for DJs who play every single week 3 times. I don't know, but sometimes you have like that feeling and that connection that you feel that you're in the zone, and something magic is happening, and it's not happening. It's not happening very often. I mean.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And you just take me to those moments of like how you describe those moments, like in the car when you just know what's about to happen. And I really missed that now from a gig perspective. Of obviously none of us have really played any gigs for the last year or so we're all missing it, of course.
Sure.
But just those moments of queuing up my next record in front of a full club of people and knowing that the next record I'm going to play is going to absolutely blow the roof off the place.
Exactly.
And you're just so confident and so certain in your choices that it becomes like almost automatic. Like you're not thinking about it at all. It's all based on feel and everything else.
It comes automatic, and this happens when you drive a very competitive car with loads of grip. You can do whatever you want. You're like, I know that whenever I put fresh tire on, I'm gonna be P1. I'm gonna be on pole, because the car will allow me to drive in a certain way that I don't doubt myself, that I will be braking at that place and I will be going on power in there, and I will hit the curb in turn 5 and the car will react in this certain way. So, you expect things to happen when you ever feel that you have that extra confidence in the whole situation. It's a circumstance of variables that come in a certain way and not always are happening, because you cannot always win. And come on, we have to be fair, and we have to be very, we have to trust in ourselves, but we have to say that not every gig is excellent. Not every club is sounding great. Not every crowd is amazing, like in Berlin. So, it's important that we care about these special moments, because those special moments are what you will remember for a long time.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, though, thinking about that perspective of setup, right? Because so much in motor racing is about the setup, and this driver's got the right setup, and they've got the car where they like it, and it feels the way they want it to feel, and they've got the right amount of grip and the right amount of downforce, and they've got the right fuel load in, and you can see it when they go into the cockpit and the camera. And it's like, I thought before this episode I was going to call this From Cockpit to DJ Booth. And it's like, effectively, like that is like a race car driver's like music studio in a way, or it's their DJ booth, right? And it makes me think about, because I talk a lot about getting your creative environment, like your studio, set up in an optimal way. I mean, obviously acoustically, so it sounds right, but it's also a space that you feel comfortable in, and it's a space that you feel like you can create in, and you can kind of do your best work. So when you sort of set your own studio up, was it a similar kind of thing, of a similar mindset to, right, I used to set cars up this way, I'm going to set my music studio up in a very similar fashion and be really meticulous about it to get it to a point where I know I can do my best work in it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we talk about sports to this level, and obviously, between one driver and the other, there's like very little difference in terms of performance. Let's say two very high-end top drivers. And when you've been training forever to be one of the best of the best, and I guess it's the same mentality in music. And I do strongly believe music is not a competition. You really compete against yourself. You don't compete against the others, because music is subjective. You can feel that music or you can feel the other, but it's not just thinking that one is better than the other. It's just different. But I do have I do feel a lot of similarities in the way that I head into the studio, or I embrace my life in a certain way. So routines, like schedule, timings, for me are crucial to be efficient, to be better than yesterday, and to improve my technique in the studio, and to improve my feelings as a music producer, as a person. I need to do the breaks at a certain point. I need to train hard in order to disconnect from the studio. I need to sleep a certain amount of hours. I know if I don't do these things, I wouldn't be doing the music I do, probably. And I feel like when you listen to someone's music, you are describing that whomever made it, you know. And that's what I feel when or at least for me, you know, I listen to my music and I describe myself in there, and I can see my good sides, my downsides, everything is just in the music. So yeah, I mean, I definitely cut loads of things I used to do when I was racing and when I was a sports athlete, and still are, of course, because I'm still training hard, and I'm back into racing actually now. But but this life, somehow you keep it for whatever you do next, and in this case, for me, is music producing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool to sort of hear that kind of thing. Of it's very similar to a lot of the advice that we give artists, which is, you know, again, have a repeatable routine that is easy, that doesn't feel like too much like hard work, that, you know, you have the right amount of time to do all of these different things, and it's balanced at the end of the day. But
Yeah.
the thing that I love the most of what you've just said is the fact that your music is, by your own definition, an extension of you. And that's always something that we're working on with people, which is, you know, to help them understand that, you know, you have to value your music in a number of different ways, because it is a representation of you, not, as a lot of artists are doing now, and this is no criticism of anyone, that I get the feeling that a lot of dance music is made these days in order to get people into a certain position within the industry that they would like to be in. So they're making what's trendy rather than what's actually in their heart,
Yeah.
so to speak. But the irony of that situation is that the music that is the most successful is the ones that come from the heart and are actually extensions of themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And indeed, it happened to me a couple of times. Like a certain label asks you for music, or even you try to make a package of music for that label, because you know that maybe it might be good for your career, that you would be maybe, you know, like having better shows, or you know, just expanding your life, and it just didn't work. It's insane. And it's nice for me to say it, because I've experienced that in the past, and whenever I tried to work in the studio for something with a goal of doing this to have a reaction in the crowd, it didn't work. It didn't really work. I I underperformed actually, because music is coming from feelings, from the heart, and you don't have to have a goal actually. I mean, the goal is to enjoy, to have fun while you make this music, and then you will see what you do with it. You might never release it, or you will keep it for years, and then someone will come to you because they've listened to this track in a show, and they will maybe try to release it somewhere else. But I don't think there must be a certain obsessive goal on working in the studio for something. Just take it easy. That's my advice to myself actually, and I keep on telling me every single day I work. I just do okay, even if I'm not following the trend or whatever everyone is expecting from me. I might do something different because I heard, I don't know, like UK's breakbeat, and I felt inspired this week by hearing this kind of groove and vibe. And now I really would like to do a track with, yeah, like trying to go out of your comfort zone and trying to experiment with something else. But it might surprise you. That's what I'm talking about.
No, absolutely. No, it's great. And I love, like, again, another thing we talked about briefly before we started recording was, like, your story about how you got into electronic music. Because I think a lot of people would be forgiven for thinking, like, oh, this is something he's done after he finished in Formula One, right? And actually, that's not the case at all. These two paths have been running parallel for, well, almost your entire life in a way.
Yeah, yeah. They've been going parallel all my entire life, and I would have. I mean, I couldn't really push I couldn't really start working 100% on music till I retired 5 years ago. So even, because it requires a lot of time if you want to do it well, and you want to make sure that you have the knowledge to make music, and you somehow improve because you have a better understanding from the music industry, from how everything works, to improve your sound, your mix, your there's a lot of work to do, and it doesn't happen from one day to the other. I still I still study, and I still improve, and there's still a lot of margin of improvement, and I think that's the way you should look at things. And as I said, it didn't really happen till I decided to retire my racing career 5 years ago and decided to start my music seriously. Even though I was making music before, it was not till the day I retired where I could feel, right, this is happening now, so I have to put everything in the oven and go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, super cool, super cool, and I love the story you told me just before we started recording as well about
Yeah.
you guys like 19 years of age, like ripping around in go karts and stuff, but you've got like a little DJ booth at the side and stuff. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. It was part of a friendship relation, and of course Ibiza has always been in my heart because like it's where all started, and all my roots are in there, and playing music with my friends still is something beautiful and nice. Playing for yourself even, it's great. However, when I discovered music making, it was much more attractive for me than not really playing music. Of course, it's always nice, and now we are all dying to play music after the pandemic, of course. But being in the studio, creating a piece of music that or that somehow you might not know, but after a while, when it gets released, you kind of know that it's working out and people are listening to it and they're enjoying it. You feel like fulfilled as a human being because you're like, wow, I've done something that people are caring about it, and it's just generating that feeling that I felt and it didn't exist. So it's pretty cool.
No, it is, man. It's amazing. I get this mental image in my mind of like,
Yeah.
those memes you see of like people making music in like inappropriate situations. Like
Yeah.
I've got this idea in my head of like you sat at the side of like the garage in the F1 car, and you've just got your laptop open instead of looking at like, the telemetry, you're looking at Ableton instead, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I worked a lot with racing data, of course. There's a lot of work to do as a racing driver when you're not driving. There's a lot of work to do because it's not just about talent; it's also about understanding how to be quicker than your teammate, especially in Formula One when you don't really have. Whenever you don't really have a car to win, everyone is comparing you to your teammate because he's the one who's driving with your same conditions. So, so obviously there's a lot of data, there's a lot of engineering that you have to understand. You have to be an engineer actually to make your car be quicker and understand how aerodynamics work in a certain way, of course, and and driving styles. Obviously, normally you have a very very quick teammate, and it's very tough to beat. But yeah, working when when you're out of the helmet and you're out of the car, it's a very very important thing to do. Yeah.
And again, like you were saying, you're an engineer essentially in that case, and again, it's the same in music as well because you have to be like an audio engineer to an
Yeah,
extent
it.
as
I mean,
well.
as a certain extent, I don't actually mix my music because I've done it in a certain time, but I've decided the best thing sometimes is to give it to someone who's really dedicated into this and somehow is going to extract something that maybe your eyes and your ears didn't really see before. So I'm part of. I'm very happy because Matthew Styles is like mixing all my music, and I'm super happy that the job he's doing for me, because it's like whenever I received the music from him, it's like sounding three-dimensional, and I
Amazing.
don't have a clue how he makes that. So
Well, that's it. I mean, I think artists do fall into one of two camps. I mean, I'm in the other camp. I'm a complete control freak, and like I like to, take it from the very first kick drum right the way through to the final master. Like that's just my, my curse basically. Like I have to do that. That's just the way I am. And then there's
yeah,
other artists who can hand it off to people quite comfortably. And like you say, someone like Matthew, for example, can bring an aspect that you might not have even considered before
yeah,
or heard before, because you're so close to the music and you're so sort of emotionally sort of too close to it, right? You're so
yeah,
invested in it musically and emotionally as well. So it's funny because I love that conversation of like figuring out what side of the fence people are on, because I find it fascinating to see like just how far in the process people want to be. Like some of the artists I've worked with, like you even say the word mix down and they run out of the studio. They've got a meeting, they've got
I'm scared.
or they're just like, I don't care, like make it sound good, I'm going to a meeting, goodbye. I've got a lunch somewhere in 2 hours.
Yeah,
Like I'll come back when it's done, like thanks, call
it's
me.
a lot of work. It's a lot of
Yeah, it is. And even for engineers like myself, like even when I'm mixing my own stuff, it's still like a case of like, why am I doing this to myself? Like it's just torture every time.
it's a torture.
It
It's a
really is. And especially if you've got a full album that you've just done in the
yeah.
last year as well, like you don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty quick. It was a we Matthew didn't take much to mix the whole album out, but we kind of run through the whole music again, and there was some revisions to go and to do. Some of them they were just amazing, sounding amazing at the first take. But some of them have to be reviewed because, as you said, sometimes it's very different when you make the music to when you actually give it to someone else that maybe is seeing things that you feel different, and something in the music is changing. And if that is changing, sometimes the message is changing, and you have to review that. So sometimes it's not as easy as it looks, but that's part of the process. So at the end of the day, this is just always like this compromise between the composer, music producer, and the engineer.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. So I'm interested in this album and what the concept and the sound and the flow of it is. So can you talk a little bit about that
Yeah,
and
of course. Yeah, I mean,
satisfy my curiosity about it?
I'm very excited, especially because Squire has always been making dance floor music, basically. Whether it's more deep house or techno, at the end of the day, is to make people dance, to make people feel a certain feeling in a spot of being with community and dancing, sharing their feelings. That's what Squire is. That's what the project, because I feel that is. And I love electronic music, and I will keep on, of course, doing dance records. And I really am really dying to play. But I thought if I was heading towards an album project, I thought I had to think it differently. And by that I mean like I had to do something more personal, more conceptual, more experimental, something that surprises myself and I guess the listeners as well. So that's why, first of all, it was the best moment for me to do it was during the quarantine period.
Mm-hmm.
So we were at home, and the album is called Stop. So that's why I called it Stop, because everyone had to stop at some point. And it came very naturally, very organic. There was no hush or hurry to to go somewhere or to finish or to, there was no deadline. So I took it really, really, really calm. And the music itself, it's a bit of everything. I think there's only one or two maximum. Yeah, there's two dance floor tracks, but the rest are all maybe pop, and down tempo. There's one more like breakbeat, upbeat, but all the music is organized with a purpose from track 1 to track 10. And there's like a beautiful intro with all these piano chords. Well, I think they're beautiful. And I've worked with a lot of singers on this album, which I'm super happy because they come from the opera world, the pop world, and they've kind of helped me out to open my mind to new genres and new styles of music. So I think it's like a new version of Squire, which I was really looking for. I was very, very I was really, really inspired by like this alternative pop kind of. I don't know if you watched the film Drive. The soundtrack of that film is like,
I
love this group called Chromatics. And
Tick of the Clock, right? Amazing, amazing track, amazing.
So, I've played a lot with like analog gear, Moog synthesizers, arpeggios, and all of that warmth. I feel it's in there, and yeah, I mean, I'm very, very proud of how it ended up. Matthew did an incredible job with mixing. I mean, I never thought my music could sound this good, even though I'm sure there's still room to improve, but I'm really happy how it sounds already. And yeah, I mean, the only thing is that I don't know where and when I will publish it. That's the only thing. Because now it's like very strange, like when I've released a record with Selador, Dave Siemens' label, at the beginning of the year. And it was a dance floor record, and I was really looking forward to release it. But it's like difficult because you don't know who's going to play it, where, because clubs are shut down and people can't dance. So it's kind of, a bit frustrating nowadays. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah, there's a few things to unpack there. First of all, I'm a good friend of Dave's. Know Dave very well. I've also released on Selador myself in the past.
Oh, nice.
And actually, like the closest person in Selador that I'm really close to is actually Steve. You've met Steve Parry?
Yeah, super nice.
Yeah. So Steve is from the same town in Liverpool where I'm from.
And okay.
Exact, correct, full true story. Steve Parry gave me my first ever DJ gig.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah. And then years later, I returned the favour because I was working at a college in Liverpool teaching music production. I taught Steve music production. We worked together on a number of his records, actually. Like I did like the same thing as, what your guys doing for mixing and stuff. I did like engineering and mixing for Steve and stuff like that for some of his releases on Bedrock and stuff like that. And it was really, really cool. So yeah, me and Steve go back a long, long way, like over 20 years. Like, and you were talking before about, before we started recording about like vinyl and how cool it was, like, to have like, that exclusive record that like no one else had. Steve was like the guy in Liverpool for that back in the day because he used to work in one of the iconic record shops here. So I got to know Steve by being a complete pain in his ass, basically.
Really?
I just go in at like 18, 19 years of age. Like how far back I'm going? I'm 41 now. And I'm literally just like, come on, give me it. And like, I just basically just tormented him into like giving me like exclusive records and little white labels and under the counter stuff. And that's kind of how I got started in the industry, really. Wow. And then, I actually owned my own record shop for a while and I was all in that culture and stuff like that. So it's so funny that you're releasing with like Steve and Dave, like, cause they're such like close buddies of mine.
Yeah. Like. Yeah. I mean, I think they're eminencies. They're amazing. And yeah, I'm very proud to have released on Selador. Actually, it's a label that I've always supported and liked what they've done, And the record, unfortunately, it didn't maybe go the way I expected, to be honest, because probably it's not the right time. As I was saying before, it's not the right time to release electronic dance floor music at the moment, because I know I would play 100% the music I've released on Selador, but I can't play it because there's nowhere to play it. And I guess this is the same situation for many artists at the moment.
No, it is totally.
But yeah, I mean, they've treated me really, really well. They look amazing people, super professional, and yeah, looking forward to work further with them.
Yeah, this hopefully Dave's listening to this. That'll give him the push to actually get him on the podcast. I've been asking him, I've been pestering him since the beginning of the year. It's like, Dave, come on the podcast, come on, mate, come on. He's a really interesting guy. He's got great taste in films as well. Actually, like he's really into films and stuff. So I really want to pick his brains about film and stuff. But yeah, it's right, man. I mean, I personally have almost like completely held off on releasing new music. I've had a very different story to you because I've kind of really focused on like helping other people through the pandemic, through this platform, and mentoring people and coaching people, and that's been really enriching. It's been really necessary because it's kind of given me something to focus on. But like you mentioned, after the album finished, you were like sort of completely dry creatively and you needed to take like a break. Like I've been there for almost the whole pandemic because I need to be going off to Ibiza. I need to go to Amsterdam. I need experiences in life that give me something to bring back into the studio and that I can write about.
100%.
For me, didn't happen for me. So if I'm like staring at the same four walls every day, it's like sooner or later that's just gonna run out. So I just put my focus on other people. Have finished a few tracks, but I've held them back, quite frankly, until the right time. And hopefully over the next 6 months, a year or something, I'll get back to releasing on a regular schedule because it's more relevant and I can actually see from different parts of the world that people are reacting to music when DJs play them and everything else. So I totally agree with you. So is that the plan with the album then, is to maybe just sort of wait and see what happens with it and then release it at what you think the right time is?
Yeah, I think that's the idea. I mean, there's no deadline and there's no like rush to release this because why you should release it now. So I think we're gonna wait. I think this is the best logical move to do. And as you said, you need inspiration to keep on going, to keep on running. I think we are running through a very difficult moment for the music industry, and hopefully we're back on track soon. I think people are dying to listen to music in community, to experience and enjoy music again. And hopefully very soon we are back in there.
No, absolutely. We had our first test event here not last weekend, the weekend before. I think in the last couple of weeks we had Youssef put two nights on at 3,000 each, and apparently the results are very, very positive where that's concerned. But just to actually see people in what we would call like a normal situation, it's been beautiful to watch. I mean, I didn't attend, but I watched from afar and was just like, thank God, like thank God this is happening again, and we're moving towards something. And I had Josh Butler on the podcast recently, who's a friend of mine, and he's out in New Zealand and he's been playing to like full houses in New Zealand for months now. Like they've been back to normal for nearly like most of this year. And like even Josh said, like the first gig that he played in New Zealand after it all, he said, I was so nervous, like I was so anxious because I hadn't played a record in a year to people. And then it's like I've not actually been in a room with this many people at the same time. So I feel weird about that. But I said to him, well, how did it unfold? And he went, after I played my first couple of records, it was like, fine, back to normal. Everyone's happy, So it's amazing how quickly we adjust back, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think we all need that because at the end of the day, it's nice to share the music with the people who really want to have a good time. And I completely understand. Whenever you're there for the first record, you're like, okay, I need to re-understand how to play music, but obviously you never forget that. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's interesting, isn't it? But so yeah, in terms of like I know you mentioned before about Moog synthesizers and stuff. Like I'm really fascinated into what your setup is, and are you predominantly hardware? Are you more plug-in based? Like what's the Squire setup at the moment?
Well, I use a bit of everything, to be honest. I used to have more hardware stuff in the past, but unfortunately, I should have not sold it. But I did it because I thought like, okay, like the the Korg Monopoly, which is like a very classical synthesizer, and I didn't use it much because kind of my music was more colorful and pads and synth lines that didn't really go along with that synth. But and I thought, okay, I have the plugin version and so on, and it's just because I don't have a really big studio, but now I have another studio where I'm here, and I'm gonna build one here. So I should have never sold that synth and another synths I used to have, but I think at some point of your life you're gonna plug them in again and make them sound, and maybe you struck something out from them. So these machines are beautiful because you touch them first of all, and that's the whole point. You touch something, and it's an instrument. You play with it, and instruments are amazing. They react in a certain way that a plugin, even if the algorithm and the design of the plugin is created in a certain way, might not ever do because it doesn't have the circuits and the and the electricity that maybe the other hardware have. So I use both. I use both. I use a lot my Moog Voyager, which is a great synthesizer for bass lines. I love the Virus TI desktop. I use it a lot for melodies,
I
arpeggio.
literally just bought one over
Okay.
the pandemic, and the joke that has been going on for the last few weeks is hopefully this is the only virus I get during the pandemic,
Yeah.
which is such a stupid like dad joke,
Yeah.
but I can't help but make it.
Yeah.
But
Hopefully.
yeah, I adore those things because like from my time working with Sasha, like that was such a huge part of his sound. And as I say, I've got the TI Polar now, the actual with the
Yeah.
keyboard, and like you say, like just to have that in front of you and just to be able to physically touch it, it brings like an inspiration that doesn't really happen when it comes to plugins, really.
Yeah. Exactly. And I have a Juno 60 actually, and it
Nice.
sounds amazing. I love it. I run all these things through a preamp because I just like a little bit more tube feeling, and it has like more warmth and sounds better. And I have a couple of drum machines as well, who I also pass it through the preamps, and they sound kind of bigger and better. And I love the Omnisphere as a plugin. I think it's super complete, and it gives you the possibility to play around many, like many parameters, and it's great. And there are many other plugins, of course. We would be here talking about this till tomorrow.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, totally, totally. But yeah, it's nice to kind of hear that balance, right, between hardware and software, and honestly, it's mostly about finding what works for you because I do think that the sound of plugins now compared to hardware, the gap is certainly a lot smaller than it used to be, and certainly to the untrained ear, like a lot of people really now, like especially on dance floors, they can't really tell the difference. So for me, I think it's a case of what works for you in your creative process
Yeah,
rather than what it used to be, which was clearly like hardware is better than software, but
yeah.
you have to be able to afford to have it and the space and everything.
Mm.
So it's cool. So you mentioned Ableton. Is that still the main DAW for you?
Yeah. I use Ableton because it's like it's been there forever. I've been using this since the first day I started to make music.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried other softwares, but I don't feel the freedom of creativity that I have and that I feel I can have with Ableton. So that's why I've been stuck to Ableton forever. and I use them as well. I can use it on while I'm flying in an airplane or while I'm at the airport as well with my laptop. So it's super easy to use and it's very kind of systematic. It just everything makes sense. Very happy with it.
No, totally, yeah. It's been something I've been using for a long time as well. I think my first version of Live was something like Live 3 or something like that, like way back in the day.
Yeah.
Like back before it would even like load in like MP3s, it was like WAV only. Like you had to warp everything yourself manually. Like it wouldn't even try and predict what it is that you're trying to do. So it's amazing to think like how far it's come. And, for me, like the actual thing that's really made a huge difference for me has been the push controller. I absolutely adore that thing. I think it's amazing. And it actually makes Ableton as a DAW feel like a piece of hardware. Because there's long passages when I'm working within Ableton with the push where I don't even look at the computer. Like I'm just looking at the hardware. I'm looking at the controller and I'm controlling it like, a drum machine or, a Moog Voyager or, whatever it is. And, a lot of my arrangements tend to be more like kind of long form sort of live jams that I do within Ableton that I kind of then stitch together with automation rather than it being something that I'll sit in a chair and kind of go, right, so this goes here and this goes here in the next 8 bars. And I find that my music, like there's a place for that, absolutely. But I find personally my music gets a little bit predictable when I arrange that way. So one of the things that Ableton's really given me is that ability to almost like perform my tracks live but in a studio setting, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. I work with a session view in Ableton because this permits me. I mean, I would love to do live, and I obviously would love to play my album live in the future. But I love to work in the Ableton's session view because I can feel like I have the control of every stem, and I can kind of not to be as exact as I want to be. I work a lot with layers. Like if I am trying to get this certain sound on a snare, I work maybe with 3 or 4 different snares or claps or clicks that make it sound in a different way and try to isolate some frequencies. And Ableton gives me the possibility to be so quick on working on those and to change maybe the timings. So trying to be not as mathematical as possible to make it feel more organic, more unpredictable in that way. And I feel like when music doesn't sound unpredictable or less mathematical, it has this human element that makes it sound more organic in a way. And I love that. I really enjoy trying to get that,
Yeah, totally. I think it's really interesting you say that because I often say this to when I give feedback to people when I listen to tracks, because we do on our platform, we do monthly community kind of track feedback sessions where we all give each other kind of constructive feedback on tracks and how to improve and stuff, and it's always a good time. And it's a funny thing because I can always hear now when someone's been, as you said, very sort of mathematical with things like automation, where they've kind of just drawn it in with the mouse, compared to tracks that have had automation done to them live using controllers or live on a synthesizer, for example, because it always feels more dynamic. It always feels more human, right, and more natural. And there's more of a vibe to it where, I like, the way I say it is I like music that is not polite. I always like tracks that feel a little bit kind of again, they're a bit predictable. Chaotic. I always call them, it's I have this stupid way of talking about it. It's I feel like this track is coming out of the speakers and kind of shaking me by the hand and asking me how my weekend was. Whereas what I want it to do is jump out and basically just punch me in the face as hard as possible. I want it to really hit me. I want it to be more impactful and not more aggressive, I suppose, or just more dynamic and more like a human has made it rather than an algorithm in a way.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So talk to me about musical influences, because I know you've been into this music for a long, long time, and you were talking about how it was even running parallel when you got into the Red Bull development program, like right at the start of your career. So what was like? Was there a record that made you go, "Yeah, this is it. This is what I'm into, and this is what I'm going to spend my life listening to."
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I think while you grow and you are being educated in values, while you are kind of developing as a human being and as a professional, you are maturing, and you are probably as well listening different music. You have different influences. I am one of those guys that believe that you have to go out of your comfort zone, and you have to always try to discover a new group or a new sound or something that something that surprises you, and you're like, how did those guys this made this sound? Maybe you wouldn't do it, maybe you wouldn't go for it, but you're like, wow, they were really aggressive on doing that, and this is challenging and this is cool. So just to get an idea, I've been listening a lot to RNS Records.
Mm-hmm.
I love the label because they've been disruptive. They've been super disruptive, and that's what I love from record labels and from embracing music. That you are not looking for a certain sound, you're looking for freedom, creativeness, but also for surprises. For something that is breaking the rule. And when I was a kid, of course, I was listening. When I started playing, I was listening to Carl Cox, to Miss Kidding, to DJs that were very famous in Ibiza. This is what we have: Laurent Garnier, techno, electropop artists that they used to play at Space. You would hear them in the radio. I was a good friend of Ibiza's global radio boss and founder, and we were playing together. And I couldn't go to clubs. My first gig was actually in Dal Villa in the center of Ibiza when I was 16. It was a gay club, and I played there for like half an hour. I played my 2 first records, and I was like super excited already. And from there, you kind of start to get into electronic music and start listening to all the mixtapes and DJ sets from your kind of first influences that you've been getting to music. But then you realize that there's like much more music behind, and you kind of try to understand what you're looking for and who you are. Because as we said before, music is describing yourself. So you discover like James Holden, Ethan Fake, and all these old school guys. And you are then, I am a very indie pop fan. I love London Grammar. I love 83. Then I discovered in 2003, 2006 or 7, I discovered Moby. And this was like, oh my God, this guy he's a hero, like he's a legend. So if you ask me for a record that I would never forget, it would be, of course, the 1998 album, Play the B-Sides from Moby, which is one of the main tracks, of course. It is Porcelain. I think that's like definitely a piece of art. Mm-hmm. And I love this guy. I mean, everything he does is magic. It's like her feelings. I feel my music is very, very influenced from Moby's, especially because he's trying to get this like very epical strings and pads and atmospheres. I feel my sound is very atmospheric. I try to create this kind of environment feeling. Matthew, always, my mix engineer, always tells me that I put too much energy on the mid-range, because that's those areas where the pads are laying, and because I love this kind of tension behind and moving the chords and the pads all the time in that area. It's like creating that flow of flying into the music, like getting inside the music. So yeah, I mean, I love Moby, I love Radiohead, I love many groups that have been influenced my life, but of course not at the same time. So I'm trying to discover new sounds, new groups, new ways of making music that are inspiring for me to then have better ideas. And at the end, we don't have to hide ourselves. We are just copying other people. That's the whole story. I mean, I'm not any genius. I just make music the best way I can, but I'm kind of replicating what I feel, what I hear, how I represent it, how I embrace that sound, and then create it, because this has been inspired for me. I've been inspired for something else, even if it's not music, even if I see the blue sky from Barcelona right now, and I have this idea coming, and I replicate it in frequencies in music. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it makes total sense that you're so into like the whole chromatics thing from the Drive soundtrack, because there's that lovely transition, isn't there, from the really amazing beats into those really gorgeous, amazing pads that just seem to hang in the air in that moment, like just so great, so tense, so emotional, but like so kind of warm, and they kind of just wash over you, right? It's so cool.
It's amazing. Yeah,
it's an amazing
I love that track.
Yeah, and I'm kind of very similar in a lot of ways. It's funny speaking to you and listening to your story, because like, you know, about like, you know, you were DJing before you were going to clubs and stuff, and you know, you were learning and playing for yourself and playing with friends. It's exactly the same story for me. Like, I'd already learned to DJ by the time I first got into a club, and you know, you had Ibiza on your doorstep, but I had Cream in Liverpool, like literally 10 minutes away from my house. So it was like, you know, the way English people go to a pub on a Friday or a Saturday night, I didn't go to the pub. I went to Cream. Like, that was my education. Like, that was my church to an extent, and that's where I kind of really got my education, you know. But it's so totally true, and you know, I try and sort of straddle, because as we mentioned before we were on air, that, you know, I've kind of worked in the film industry quite a bit as well, so my sound is sort of like on that edge of, I'm trying to bring elements of film scoring into dance music. Like, that's what I'm into. I'm trying to bring the orchestral sound. I'm trying to bring that electronic element to it. And, you know, my thing is like, I'm trying to make my music as cinematic as possible. That's what really lights me on fire, is try and bring those influences in. And you're right in what you're saying, that, you know, we're all just versions of everything that we like. You know, we're not original, you know, and I see so many artists kind of like completely destroy themselves because they're not like completely reinventing the wheel. And it's like, well, the wheel's already been invented, dude. Just make your music. Like, it's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Yeah, totally. So I'm looking forward to hear the album, because like, now I know some of the influences behind it. I'm really, really interested in it. So, you know, hopefully it will see the light of day in the next few months as things hopefully start to improve worldwide, and you know, you can start getting back out on the road. And you know, I know you mentioned you're heading back into racing, or you're already back into racing. Is that going to be like in combination? Are you going to try and get out and play some gigs soon and stuff like that as well?
To be honest, I don't believe in that. I think I don't think it's the best to combine it with a tour, and if you do something, you have to commit for that. But of course, there is a lot. Like, we've been running through a very strong, and the pandemic hit very hard to the music business, and to stay at home for so many days without the light, without seeing the light and knowing when this whole thing is going to restart. Which I understand, you know, we're running the whole world is under war with a virus that we have to be brave, and we have to be clever enough to finish it all together. Of course, we have to work in community, but for us that we are in the music industry that have been affected, probably our business have been most affected, or more affected than other areas and other businesses. It's important that we still feel inspired by something, that something drives us towards the future. And for me, racing, because I love racing, I still love driving, is something that inspires me. So I thought, okay, what happens if I'm back in a go-kart and I'm still competitive and I still feel it? So I'm just, I'm back in racing, but with a very different mentality from what I used to have back when I was 20 years old. I want to be competitive. I want to be in the front. I want to win. That's never changing. But I want to enjoy. I mean, I want to have fun. If I don't win, it's not the end of the world. My job is to make music. I enjoy making music. I love my job. And then we will see. I mean, it's not going to go forever. I'm back into racing now for a period of time. I don't know what will happen, to be honest. I think nobody knows. Unfortunately, I really hope this is over. I really hope 2022 is the year of recovery. Is the year that we can already, we can hug each other and we can kiss to each other and we can be back to where we were. And then we will take it from there. But in the meantime, it's important that we keep focused, we keep happy, we keep motivated. So for me, going back to racing and driving, it's a way to keep that momentum happening and not falling apart in a way.
No, totally. And I think there's been a lot made over the last year, and I've seen this a lot as being a mentor and a coach to people in this industry. There's been a lot made of you have to make the most of this time. You should be making all of these tracks, and you should be hustling and working harder than ever in the studio, because when it all opens back up again, you'll be in the front. And the opposite is actually what I'm hearing from a lot of artists. It's it's gone on for so long now. Like you were saying, again, with the end of your album creation, it's well, I've got nothing to write about. I've got nothing to say. And I think it's important to actually say to people listening that that's okay. Don't worry that you're not making music at the moment, because there's nowhere for it to be played. As you mentioned before, you can release music to keep yourself kind of, in people's minds, but, these releases are probably not going to go as well as they could do under normal circumstances. So it's perfectly fine to take a break. It's perfectly fine to take some time for yourself and maybe even go and do something else for a while and then come back to it as things start to improve and you start to feel inspired again. It's totally fine to take a break.
Yeah. I think it's the wisest decision, and you can't not really ask too much in this period of time. And probably that this is what helps me to finish the album, because I was worried I was not really. I don't know. I never. This was my first album project, and whenever you do things for the first time, you actually ask yourself, what's going to happen? So I took it very easily, step by step, and flowing with what I feel every day in the studio. When I finished that, I just didn't have any other story to tell. So that's why I said, okay, shut it down and make the album finish. It's not a problem of having 15 or 16 tracks. It's a problem of having the right tracks, the right songs. And that's why I decided to lower it down to 10. I had more music, but at some point I thought, okay, I have explained a sufficient story that people understand what's going on, what's happening in here.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think it's so refreshing to hear that, because again, there's very much a hustle culture within dance music of you should always be making music and you should always be releasing music, and I don't think that's the healthiest way to be, and I also don't think it's the most creatively rewarding. It's not the way to actually fulfill your potential as an artist. I mean, I've mentioned this on a number of episodes of the podcast, but there's a famous interview with David Bowie, and he had a very long gap between albums. I think he went 10 or 12 years between albums at one stage in his life, and a journalist asked him in an interview why is it taking you so long to make this album? And David Bowie just looked at him flat and just said, I had nothing to say. It's
Sure.
like, you expect me, like, of all people, to make an album when I've got nothing to write about. Like, it's not going to happen. Like,
Yeah.
and that's all the best artists do. It's like, I've got nothing to say, so I'm going to go off and maybe live my life for a while
Yeah.
so I can come back into the studio and have something to write about, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed. I,
Indeed, indeed. So, what's on the near horizon for you? Are you heading back towards the studio in the near future? Are you focusing on racing? What's the next sort of 6 months or the rest of 2021 hold
well,
for you,
I'm
my friend?
very excited actually because I'm back in the studio. I've been out for like almost 2 months,
Hmm.
and I'm back into making dance floor music because I feel like I really want to dance. So I really want to be in the club and festivals again. So the only party I can have is myself on my own in my studio. So I've been working on new tracks. I'm launching a new label called Anims. I'm really
Great.
looking forward for that. We are releasing the first release on July this year, from Spanish artists, and hopefully with a remix from Luca Alessi. He's done a remix for me on a release on Mobile, and he's like I really like his music, and I'm really looking forward to hear his version of this original version of the first release in Anims. And Anims has a beautiful story, I guess, behind, because we are like a platform of a communication platform on one side, a record label on the other.
Hmm.
We're trying to host a TV show where we invite one. We have two guests. One is coming from the sports world, and the other one is coming from the culture world, being related to a chef or a designer, or a musician. And we want to tell stories about motivation and personal growth. So what we want to hear from these two guests is their own personal story that they've lived through tough moments they've been experienced in their life.
Mm.
And I'm really looking forward for that because I have a story to tell, but it's not about me. It's about Anims. It's about a project that wants to inspire people and wants to animate people. Anims is coming from a Spanish Catalan word called cheer up, basically in English. It means like, come on, go, do it, cheer up. So when something is not working, you would push someone to kind of give him support, right? You just want him to feel positive. So you say anims, come on, anims, animos, va. And that's why I thought this would be a nice word of inspiring people. So we tell and we explain, I guess, inspiring and motivational stories through a platform called Anims. And then the record. Yeah.
Amazing, fantastic, and yeah, we're
Super
here to do. I'm excited for you, and I love the concept, and anything we can do here at MYT, because MYT stands for Make Your Transition. It is about moving from where you are to where you want to be in life, and that's not just musically, that's overall. So we're focused on, like, our tagline is like, become the best artist you can be by becoming the best version of yourself, because they are not exclusive things, they're not separate things. You can't do one without doing the other. And we try and kind of break the myth of, like, artists that they must be like a tortured kind of like mad genius in order to make good music, and it's not the case at all. I've always said that if I'm not in the best frames of mind, like, you can't even get me in a studio, never mind making my best music. So it's not true at all. Like, you have to be in the best position you can be. So we look at everything, not just the music production side. We look at mindset, we look at people's personal growth stories. So there's a lot of parallels between what you're going to do with Anims and what we're looking at. So anything that we can do to support you guys,
thank you.
Just ask away, dude, because I'm more than happy to put my weight behind anything that's going to create positive change, not just in the music industry, but also in life in general.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Will do. No, you're welcome. We should do this again sometime, and hopefully we should do it in person at some point.
Yeah, why not? I'm sure we will meet in person somehow.
Indeed. Well, thanks very much for this today, mate. This
Thank
has
you
been
so
absolutely
much, Paul.
fantastic. It's been amazing. So yeah.
Thank you.
So,
My pleasure.
speak to you soon. Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Catch new episodes of Beyond the Studio every single week on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy your podcasts.